Joining us now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Prime Minister, thanks for the time.
Thank you. Good to be with you, and it's an opportunity to wish you and the American people and our Christian friends around the world, first of all, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
You had these extensive meetings at Mar-a-Lago Monday. What is your main takeaway from that, from your perspective?
The strength of the alliance between Israel and America. Israel emerged from the seven-front war that was foisted on us as the most powerful country in the Middle East. But part of that is this tremendous alliance that we have with the United States under President Trump. It's just a partnership of like-minded peoples and leaders, and I am very grateful to President Trump for that support that he gives us.
Let's talk about the ceasefire and where it stands. What has been so hard about getting to phase 2, which is of this peace plan, the Hamas disarmament, getting an international stabilization force on the ground in Gaza?
Well, one word, disarmament. Hamas committed to disarm. It's got still about 20,000 people with basically Kalashnikov rifles, which they use periodically to execute anyone who doesn't want the continuation of their tyranny. So they kill a lot of Palestinians who don't want them. And they have altogether 60,000 AK rifles. That's what disarmament means. You got to take all these rifles, take them away from them, and break up those terror tunnels that they have. Still hundreds of kilometers of terror tunnels. Hamas refuses to do it.
Do you think you'll get there? Do you think you'll get to phase 2, even though there's this unwillingness by Hamas to disarm?
Look, I think we have to give it a chance. There's an attempt to bring an international force. So far, it hasn't come to fruition, but we'll give it a chance because if it can be done, again, as the President and I have said, if it can be done the easy way, fine. And if not, it'll be done another way.
Coming into this meeting, there was some media reporting that said this was a crucial meeting for the future of the Gaza deal. This is what Axios wrote. White House officials think Netanyahu is slow-walking the peace process and fear he will resume the war with Hamas. But while the Israeli Prime Minister is butting heads with Trump's team, he hopes to bring the president himself over to his more hawkish point of view, a senior Israeli official said. Fair going into that meeting, and what do you take coming out of it?
I can't deal with any one of these fake spins because I didn't have to bring the president anywhere. We saw eye to eye. He cut right to the chase. He said, look, skip all this press stuff. I mean, the real thing is you've got to get Hamas to disarm. He just banged the nail on the head,
But did you hear any of that frustration about the strikes that you've completed since the ceasefire?
Not from the president, I have to tell you. I think he understands. Look, we're attacked. These terrorists try to kill us, unfortunately sometimes kill our soldiers. What would you do? Well, you just did. There was this jihadist in Syria who killed 2 Americans. Bam! You hit them back. And the president instinctively and in any other way, conceptually, understands when you're fighting terrorists who want to kill you, kill them first or kill them in response.
Settler violence in the West Bank continues to rise, and that does threaten some regional stability. How are you addressing that?
Well, first of all, I think it's much bloated. When they're talking about it, they're talking about a handful of kids. We actually located it. It's about 70 kids. They're not from the West Bank. They're actually teenagers who come from broken homes, and they do things like chopping the olive trees, and sometimes they try to burn a home. I can't accept that. That's vigilantism. I'm taking that out. But they claim they put a false symmetry between these teenagers and 1,000, actually over 1,000 terrorist attacks against the settlers, families, mothers who are driving on the roads there with their children. Boom, they're attacked, they're slain. So there's no symmetry. I'm putting a special effort to stop this vigilantism. I can't accept it. Even if it's not parallel, even if it's not symmetrical, I want peaceful coexistence between the Israelis and the Palestinians who live in Judea, Samaria, which is part of our ancestral homeland.
The president said this.
I wouldn't say we agree on the West Bank 100%, but we will come to a conclusion on the West Bank.
Where's the daylight?
Oh, I think there's a lot of daylight because I think we both want to see a future in which that territory is not used for terrorist attacks. We've done a lot of things in that regard. We also want to build a lot of infrastructure there, both for us and for our Palestinian neighbors, and I think there's a lot of room to talk about it. But I think ultimately, Israel has to have the military control over this area because it's so tiny.
Do you see an international stabilization force in Gaza being on the ground in 26? Do you see a new government that you could live with in Gaza in 2026?
I think you have to ask, as far as the second question is concerned, a new government in Gaza is possible if you disarm Hamas. Because no one's going to come in there if Hamas stays armed, and they'll put a bullet right through the back of their head, anyone of any potential new government. So the answer to your question is, if we disarm Hamas, whether with an international force or by any other means, yes, I see a different future for Gaza. And it's the one remaining step. Everybody understands that. I think Hamas understands it. That's why they don't want to do it, because, the point here is not to negotiate with Hamas. That's not the job, their job. Their job is to vanish, stop, no more. And you know who wants it more than anyone else? The people of Gaza.
The president talked about the threat from Iran. How much has Iran rebuilt its nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities since June?
Well, it's trying to, and the president was correct when he said that, the Fordo thing was obliterated, so they're trying other sites. They'll try that. They also are trying to recover their ballistic missile production facility. It's not, we set them back considerably on both areas, but yeah, they'll try. And I think the president was right to tell them, hey, don't. That's basically what his message was. And I think with Iran, the real issue is they should accept the fact that they shouldn't have nuclear enrichment capability. They should take out all the material that they've already enriched, take it out of Iran, and have inspections.
Judging by the president, Iran's president over the weekend said that his country is in, quote, full-scale war with the U.S., Israel, and Europe. What do you think the chances are, if you were to put a percentage on it, that Israel, or the U.S. is going to have to take some action again inside Iran?
Well, I'll tell you about action, because I was presented a few days ago, actually 2 weeks ago, with the prospect that they're having field exercises in which they're practicing launching ballistic missiles at Israel. So I passed the message. I think I made it public, so it's not secret. I said, if you dare do that, the results would be devastating. So I hope Iran doesn't make that mistake.
But are they expanding ballistic missiles?
They are going back to production. As far as the nuclear program, I think they're trying to do that. I'm not sure they've decided to cross the line, because I think they heed President Trump's warnings, and also because they've just experienced something. Less than a year ago, they saw what it entails. And they have to choose. Look, we don't seek escalation. I hope they don't. But if they do, all bets are off.
What are the prospects of expanding the Abraham Accords?
Really good.
Syria, with Saudi Arabia, what's next?
I think it's possible, precisely because of the great achievements that we had fighting the Iran in its axis. Hezbollah is a shadow of itself. The Houthis are not what they were. Hamas clearly not what they were. And Iran too. Iran was a first-rate power. It was, strutting around the Middle East and the world as though they were a superpower. And so people are open to peace agreements. I hope we can do that with the Saudis and with others. And by the way, also with Muslim countries outside the Middle East who are very interested. You know why? 2 reasons. One, as I told you, Israel is a very powerful military country, and people want to partake of our knowledge. But the other thing is, we're just a high-tech juggernaut. Our economy, after 2 years of war, is going through the roof. So I think that helps peace too.
Yet you are a leader who has been embattled.
Right.
You are facing a trial.
Right.
And you say all these positive things are happening, and the war is, in your mind, heading in the right direction. But yet you're facing this trial.
I'm in trials and investigations for 10 years, in these bogus investigations. It's a political trial. The president was right to call for a pardon. And you know what this trial was about? They said that I received a bribe. You know what the bribe was? Favorable coverage in a third-rate internet site. That's the bribe. 2 years ago, the judges called the prosecution, that is politically motivated, and they tell them, hey, wait a minute. Prime Minister didn't receive positive coverage. He received negative coverage. So you should drop the bribery charge. So what's left? Well, on the first day of my cross-examination, now you got to hear this, okay? They cross-examine me. And they say, Prime Minister, 29 years ago, your son received a Bugs Bunny doll. That's what they're cross-examining. And about cigars I received from a friend. That's the trial. So it's ridiculous. It's been dissolving, and the president is right to ask for a pardon.
He said this.
How do you not? He's a wartime prime minister who's a hero. How do you not give a pardon? You know, I think it's a very hard thing not to do it. I spoke to the president, and it's on. I mean, he tells me it's on its way.
President Herzog's office denies that the president's statement about recent conversation with him on Netanyahu's pardon. There's not been a conversation between President Herzog and President Trump since the pardon request was submitted. That's according to the president's office yesterday. What's your take of where it stands?
Look, I don't know about their conversations, but I do know that the president, who's a terrific friend, he just cuts to the chase. You know, he said, "What the?" You know, he knows this is ridiculous.
Obviously, there's other people that describe the trial differently than you're depicting it, but from your point of view,
bring your camera.
Right. To the critics who say that you want this war to continue to help your political future, what do you say?
The war to continue?
Yeah, the battle.
This is so vicious and so false. You know, I've been to war. When I was 18 years old, I joined the Army and Special Forces. One of my best friends died in my arms, received mortar shrapnel. He died in my arms, you know. I lost friends. I lost a brother. I saw what happens to my parents. I saw what happens to bereaved parents in Israel. I just had a family here with the last hostage, a hero of Israel, who died. We're trying to recover his body. He killed 14 terrorists until the last bullet, and he died.
Right,
and
Ron Geely.
Ron Geely, yeah, he's an incredible hero. And I see the depth of grief, you know. So you have to go through that to understand the cost of war and the pain of war. That's the last thing I want. But I think we've had a tremendous victory, series of victories. But the real victory would be the ability to translate that into the fruits of peace. When I led the country into this war and now lead them into the search for peace, I'm on a mission. And the mission, you don't want power for power's sake. It's what you do with it. And what I want to do is to secure the future of Israel and to give it a future of peace, prosperity, and security. It's not only for us. It's for America. It's for our, you know, I started out with a call and a greetings to our Christian friends. Christians in the Middle East are being persecuted everywhere. So when I talk about helping Israel, we're also talking about helping those in the Arab world and in the Muslim world who want to make peace with us, and minorities like the Druze in Syria and the Christians in Syria and elsewhere. Give them a better life, the kind of life that Christians have in Israel and only in Israel and the Middle East.
Speaking of Syria, is President Trump wrong to trust the interim president of Syria, al-Shara?
I think he wants to give him a chance, as do we, but look at what happened. We saw the one-year anniversary of the, of this new government, and they have a march, a parade of their army. And unfortunately, half their army are jihadists. We'd like to see if we can have a different relationship with them. We have talks, which we never had with the Assad regime. And I hope it leads to a future of peace.
Last thing, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned since that horrible day of October 7th? And characterize, if you could, what you see about anti-Semitism around the world and where it stands today.
I think the lesson actually goes back to the Holocaust. If somebody says they want to kill you, they want to destroy you, annihilate you, believe them, and be prepared at all times to fend them off. We've shown that very ably with the courage of our incredible, heroic soldiers, just incredible. With the case of communities around the world of Jews, as in Sydney or Mascot, or here in the United States, you had these horrible things happen here too. I think it really depends on the position of the government. Do they speak out against it? President Trump does. Many governments don't, and they should. But Jews around the world should always know that Israel will stand by them and will help governments who want to fight anti-Semitism. And the last thing I would tell you is anti-Semitism starts with the attacks on the Jews, but it never ends there. It goes on to others, blacks, Hispanics, and so on. Eventually, it just poisons the entire society. So it's not merely in the interest of the Jewish people to fight anti-Semitism. It's the interest of all free societies to stop it.
Mr. Prime Minister, we appreciate your time, always.
Thank you, Brett.
Happy New Year.
Good to see you. Happy New Year again.
Thank you.
And many happy returns.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.